Following the 1976 reinstatement of the death penalty, Velma Barfield was the first woman to be executed in the United States and the first since 1962. Also, this was the first time the lethal injection was used on a woman. Although she was found guilty of only one murder, she subsequently confessed to multiple killings, including that of her own mother. Velma's journey to becoming the first woman executed after the death penalty's reinstatement began long before her infamous crimes. On October 23, 1932, Margie Velma Bullard was born in a tiny rural South Carolina tobacco and cotton farm in Eastover. She was, however, raised near Fayetteville. She was the youngest of 9 kids. Velma was brought up in a strict Pentecostal Christian home and has intermittently maintained a lifelong devotion to religion. Although other family members denied it, she said that her father Murphy had beaten and essayed her and her sisters. Lillian, her mother, chose not to step in. Barfield left school at the age of 17 in order to marry her boyfriend Thomas Burke. Together, Velma and Thomas had 2 children, a daughter named Kim and a son named Ron. For over 15 years, they had a fairly peaceful family life in Parkton, North Carolina. Everything went wrong in 1966 when Thomas was involved in a car accident and sustained head injuries that prevented him from working. To help support the family and make ends meet, Velma took a job in a store. It's also reported that around the same time, Velma had a hysterectomy and began to have terrible back pains, which led to a change in her behavior and the constant need of painkillers. Thomas started abusing drugs and alcohol severely after his accident in an attempt to manage the excruciating pain and headaches he was experiencing as a result of his injuries. Their relationship worsened and the days were filled with arguments. Velma was out running errands in 1969 when the couple's home inexplicably caught fire. Smoke inhalation caused Thomas's death in the fire. The house was completely destroyed by another fire that broke out a few months after the first one that claimed Thomas's life. In the months following Thomas Burke's passing, Velma started seeing Jennings Barfield, a widower. In 1970, they tied the knot. Their marriage was short-lived. Heart failure claimed Jennings Barfield's life on March 21, 1971. Returning to her parents' house in Fayetteville, North Carolina, a devastated Velma was now a widow again. Velma's father passed away from lung cancer shortly after she moved home with her parents. Lillian Bullard experienced severe diarrhea, vomiting, and nausea in 1974. She recovered completely in a few days. Bullard had the same symptoms again in the year over the Christmas season, but on December 30, 1974, a few hours after being taken to the hospital, she passed away. Lillian Bullard died of a disease that neither the physicians could diagnose and they didn't perform an autopsy. Barfield received a 6-month prison sentence after being found guilty on 7 charges of writing fraudulent checks in 1975. After serving 3 months, she was freed. Following her discharge, Velma was hired by an elderly couple, Montgomery Edwards, 94, and his 84-year-old wife Dolly, as a home health nurse. Montgomery Edwards died January 1977. Dolly Edwards also passed away a few weeks later, in late February 1977, from an unexplained stomach bug. Barfield took on another caring role in the next year, this time for Record Lee and John Henry. Record Lee, who was 76 years old, had sustained a leg fracture. John Henry, Lee's husband, began experiencing vomiting and diarrhea on June 4, 1977, coupled with excruciating chest and stomach pains. Not long after, he passed away. His physicians simply diagnosed him with a severe stomach virus. Velma had become romantically involved with widower and tobacco farmer Stuart Taylor by 1977. Taylor started to suspect that she was writing fake checks on his account to fund her addiction. She had met Taylor through Dolly Edwards. He was a relative of hers. One day, while Stuart and Velma were in Cumberland County, North Carolina, attending a Pentecostal revival meeting, Stuart started complaining of excruciating stomach pain. Early in the morning, Velma called Alice Storms, his expectant daughter, to inform her of her father's unsettling state. Bill, Alice's husband, picked up the phone. Although Velma expressed regret for waking him up, she stated Stewart's daughter needed to know that her father was gravely ill. Alice called Velma later to inquire about Taylor's condition. They both agreed it was most likely the flu. He was later admitted to the hospital while Barfield was trying to nurse him back to health. Taylor passed away on February 3, 1978, just a few days later. This time, an autopsy was ordered and performed. The sister of Velma Barfield called Lumberton police just before the report arrived, sobbing, to report that Velma had poisoned Taylor and others. Velma mixed an arsenic-based rat poison into Taylor's beer and tea. Soon after, officials re-examined the death certificates of numerous individuals who had been close to Velma. No specific tests for poisoning had been carried out, not even after the autopsy. Rather, those she knew passed away from gastroenteritis with startling regularity. The detectives were acutely aware that they were dealing with a serial killer in addition to just a simple murderer. They made the decision to take her by surprise. After questioning her about one of the many bogus checks she had made, they would pick her up and bring up Stuart Taylor's passing. At first, she acted outraged that the officers accused her of such a thing. She was asked if she would be willing to take a polygraph test, and she had no objection. When she got up to leave, one of the investigators told her that they will be looking into everything, all the way back to her own mother's death. Velma talked to her son and denied having anything to do with the murder, but at the end of the conversation she told him she only meant to make Stuart sick, not to kill him. Her son was devastated. He informed his sister about what was happening, and when Velma was taken into custody once more, they learned that their mother confessed to multiple crimes. This caused a great deal of suffering and inability to reconcile the image of a devoted mother to the one of a serial murderer. Barfield admitted to poisoning Montgomery and Dolly Edwards, John Henry Lee, and her mother Lillian with arsenic. She said that the reason she killed them was to hide the fact that she had stolen money from them to fund her drug addiction. Later on, she admitted to Stuart Taylor's poisoning. Velma seemed to truly mourn her victims and was always present at their funerals. When her late husband Thomas's body was eventually dug up, it was discovered to have arsenic residue in it as well, even if she continued to deny allegations that she had also killed him and Jennings Barfield. In December of 1978, Velma Barfield was found guilty of Stuart Taylor's first-degree murder. Aggravating circumstances were determined by the trial jury. The death penalty was recommended, and on the witness stand, Velma came across as callous and heartless, even applauding the district attorney during his closing remarks. Since there was no special area for women serving death sentences at the time, and she was the only female death row inmate in the state, Barfield was housed in an area intended for mentally ill and escape-prone inmates at Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina. She apologized for the years the medications had clouded her judgment and damaged her moral compass.
I'm sorry for the hurt that I've caused so many people.
After experiencing a spiritual awakening, she started serving other prisoners and prison staff. Barfield started composing letters to Governor Jim Hunt in which she made the case that her conversion to Christianity should be taken into account as a mitigating circumstance for changing her death penalty to a life sentence. Evangelists Billy and Ruth Graham were among the many Christians in the U.S. who gave her a lot of support. Her pleas for clemency were turned down by Governor Hunt. Barfield further appealed her conviction to the Eastern North Carolina United States District Court. The testimony of Dorothy Otnell Lewis, a psychiatry professor at New York University School of Medicine and an expert on aggressive behavior, provided a second justification for the appeal. She stated that Barfield had dissociative identity disorder. Lewis stated in her deposition that she had communicated with Billy, Barfield's other personality, who informed her that Velma had been assayed and that he, Billy, had slain her oppressors. The judge was not impressed. Lewis paraphrased him as stating, "I don't care which one did it, one of them did it." Barfield gave her attorneys instructions to give up on another attempt to the U.S. Supreme Court after her petition was turned down in federal court. She said she wanted to die with dignity and that her death would be her gateway to heaven. An execution date was set for November 2nd of 1984. She was given the option to be executed by lethal injection or lethal gas under North Carolina law, and she selected the injection. She asked the guard to get her Coca-Cola and cheese doodles because she was too anxious to eat a full last meal. Her last statement before the execution was, "I know that everybody has gone through a lot of pain, all the families connected, and I'm sorry, and I want to thank everybody who have been supporting me all these 6 years." She was required to wear a diaper and dressed for the execution in her own pink pajamas. Her chest had a cardiac monitor and stethoscope attached on it. She was strapped to the wheeled gurney, which was brought to her cell, with straps covering her legs and body. A few minutes before 2 in the morning, she had catheters put into her arms and a saline drip begun before she was wheeled into the execution chamber. Each IV line had 3 needles connected to it, each operated by a trio of volunteers. To ensure that none of the 3 volunteers could determine whether he had killed her or not, one of the IV lines was in fact a dummy. She received a lethal injection of procuronium bromide, a muscle relaxant intended to stop her heart and her breathing. At 2:15 a.m., the execution went smoothly and she was declared dead. The witnesses present at the execution said that she died peacefully, with no apparent suffering or pain. Her body was taken by a waiting ambulance around 2:25 a.m., driving past the gatherings of protesters outside the prison who were either in favor or against the death penalty. She had asked for her organs to be donated for transplants. Velma Barfield was 52 years old when she was executed. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.